אז ערב טוב לכולם, אני מתנצלת מראש על האיחור, and I will speak in English from now. So good evening, everybody. I'm so happy you could join us this evening for another session of our podcasts, or not podcasts, rather webinars from the research lab. My name is Sharon Yiron. I'm the program director of the Liebling House. And today we're very pleased to have a bilateral discussion with Switzerland, Zurich versus Tel Aviv. I hope that Toomas will join us in a second. He is the author of the film that we saw. I hope everybody saw. If not, that's okay as well. But we are going to have quite an interesting discussion today with Toomas, who is an architect, as well as with Guy Nrdi, who is an architect and a writer. He will join us for this sort of bilateral discussion from the side of Israel, and we're really excited to have you here, Guy. A little bit about us. The Liebling House, White City Center, is a joint collaboration between the Tel Aviv municipality and the German government. We are a center, a one-stop shop dealing with urbanism, conservation, architecture. We have exhibitions, lectures, a research lab, and a really nice place to come and visit and have even a coffee. So please feel welcome to join us. We're going to be open in 2 weeks from now with a great new exhibition dealing with the public space. But I want to start this discussion with a short introduction, maybe by Toomas, who has joined us already, and his movie. And Toomas, can you hear me? 1 second.
Yes. Here I am.
Yes,
here I am.
great,
Okay,
Toomas. Okay. Everything's
By the way,
okay.
Toomas was the most popular boy's name in my year, so it doesn't work as a means of distinction of guys in my age, which is why, including my children, everybody calls me Hammerly.
Okay, Hammerly.
My last name, and it means small hammer.
Yes,
So,
I'm just wondering what Guy says, because when I say Guy to you, then it's quite generic as well. No, Guy is yes, Guy is a guy in English. So
quick introduction. I'm a Swiss documentary filmmaker. I started, as you can see in the film, in the radical left. There was a youth movement in the 80s when I was quite young. 10 years in the radical left, and I thought, if I go to journalism and explain people what it's really all about, everything will become much better. Journalism made me rather cynical, and then I found documentaries where I do believe you have a chance in 90 minutes to explain a problem in a reasonable way. And my film was directed against two political things. One was that the national conservatives in Switzerland were always saying we have too many foreigners, and this was directed especially against people from the rest of the European Union, meaning they wanted to kick out Germans, Italians, Portuguese, and so on. And this is one of the things I was fighting against. And you have to know that in Switzerland, we vote about 5 times per year about issues. So this is the issue over and over again. So message number 1 from my film was, there are not too many people in Switzerland. And the second message was, at the nexus to this is that we have a housing problems in big cities like Zurich and Geneva. And my second mantra is, in cities like Zurich and Geneva, we need denser cities. We've got to build, build, build. And the whole story is told along my personal use of space. I wanted to make a purely political film, but my producer fortunately forced me to tell it along my personal story, because like this, it was more entertaining as a cinema movie.
So yeah, when I first talked to Guy, who will also introduce himself in a minute, we said, okay, I want to talk to him more about gentrification, about density, about the usage of space. But then Guy said, but it's a film about Thomas Hammerly. So I was wondering if you can just, in a short bit, explain or just describe to whomever did not see the film the parallels between your life and the story you're telling, because you are gentrification.
I mean, yeah, totally. The thing is, you know, when I was young, as I told you, I was in this radical youth movement, and I was a squatter, and I'm still proud to say that I was condemned by the state of Switzerland, so I'm a certified squatter. And I thought this was the way to a better society. And then I have lived in many places. I've been a correspondent in Paris. I lived in Vietnam. I lived in Sao Paulo, and so on and so on. And I bought an apartment in Mexico in a neighborhood that is very gentrified by now. It's very popular among hipsters. And I own a flat in Tbilisi, Georgia, and I have bought with my heritage a flat in Zurich, also in a neighborhood that has this, I mean, it's already quite gentrified. And this was the reason the film was called I Am Gentrification, because normally people who complain about gentrification always allude to the idea that gentrification is always the other guy, you know, not yourself. But I would refuse a little bit. Yes, it's a film about me, but I'm just a pretext. The real story is that I have some ideas about gentrification and what you will have to look into, and I'm just the means along which I tell the story, and this helped me to have the film more entertaining.
So to start this conversation, I would like to ask you what you think about density when you, as a tourist or as a visitor, seen Tel Aviv. Is it more like Zurich, or is it more like Mexico or Sao Paulo, or what would you compare us to?
Well, I mean, number one, it's quite a long time that it was in Tel Aviv. It was when the second Intifada started. I think it was about 2000, late 2000, that I was in Tel Aviv. And I just remember I loved the Bauhaus. And at the time, I had the impression Bauhaus was not something that was really evaluated. You had quite often, you had this horrible grills. Maybe you have to say this in Hebrew, die Zierabdeckung über den Fenstern. Something to, what would this be in Hebrew?
Yeah, well, I guess you mean like the plastic shutters and the gutters above
shutters.
the...
I mean,
yeah.
Obviously people living in beautiful Bauhaus buildings who had no clue where they were living and what the idea about Bauhaus was, right? And but having made some research, I see you have some places that are quite dense, where you have these high rises, which I think is great, which is a good idea. And I do hope that you will be able, on one hand, to preserve your Bauhaus heritage, and on the other, to really build forcefully to have a denser city. And Zurich, by contrast, is not a dense city at all. One of my favorite figures is, it's also in the film, in Switzerland, 90% of the population lives between ground floor and third floor. And in the biggest city, which is Zurich, the figure is 86%, or now it's maybe a bit less, maybe it's 80%, but it's a very flat city, right? It's not a dense city. And I remember the National Conservatives were always working. We have in Switzerland something between 7 and 8 million, and we're always saying, yes, Switzerland will be 10 million. We will adding 10 million Switzerland. And my point was always that I said, I'm against 10 million Switzerland as well. What I want is 10 million Zurich.
Yes.
By the way, it's not only a joke. I mean, you might be familiar with Winnie Maas, the Dutch architect, and theoretician, and he once draw a very interesting concept for Switzerland, very utopian, of course, but where you have one really big city, a mega city in the center of Switzerland, and where you would let big parts of Switzerland to renaturize itself, where you would have a high-scale luxury tourism for European safari, like in Africa, where you see wild animals and stuff. Very interesting idea. So Zurich is not very dense. I do believe that Tel Aviv is going in the right direction. Seeing it.
Okay, good. I would just ask you, we hear when your hands are somehow on the microphone. So.
Oh, okay. I try not to not to move too much.
Okay, thank you. It's nice that you're very into what you're saying, but it's just a little bit hard to hear. So I had the pleasure to visit Zurich a few times, and of course it seems like Zurich is a lot bigger, but actually it has almost the same amount of population as Tel Aviv, no?
Exactly, like, exactly.
Maybe we can hear Guy, Naldi. You are, Guy, you correct me if I'm wrong, but you are a real estate journalist, or how would you call yourself for the Globes? I mean, you talk about architecture, you write about architecture, but you often write about what's going on in the real estate market. Is that correct?
I'm writing for a financial newspaper. That's the first point. But I'm writing about real estate and planning in general, also about architecture. I studied architecture at the academy. This is my profession. And I enjoyed very much your film, I must say.
Thanks a lot.
And I have also a question about Zurich and density. At the film, you say that you feel that Zurich is claustrophobic. And that's the reason why you are looking for other metropolitan cities around the world. Though you say that Zurich is not dense. And I will be glad if you can speak about claustrophobia and density, the connection between claustrophobia and density.
Well, I wouldn't say that Zurich is dense. Zurich is not dense, really not. Yeah, yeah. It's a bit a garden city, and it has been like a mantra of Swiss intellectuals that they said they needed to escape. In the 70s, it was Paris, where everyone was heading to. And still to this day, the most famous essay about Swiss culture is by Nizan, and it's called Diskurs in der Enge. Let me see what is Enge. Sharon, how would you translate Enge? Is if something is narrow, right? A discourse of the narrowness. And the idea was a narrowness in the spirit. And Nizan was saying the problem with Switzerland is that we imagine ourselves always as a peasant state. And this has to do when the state was founded in 1848. It was one of the most progressive states, liberal states. And in order to have a reconciliation with the Catholics, the liberals who had won the revolution took many of these peasant needs and integrated them to Switzerland. And the guy I'm fighting most against, Mr. Blocher, who is the populist leader, is already quite old, but the populist leader of Switzerland, for example, has a huge collection of paintings of Albert Anker, who in a time when Switzerland was already quite an industrialized state, was painting all these peasant idyllic paintings. So it has to do with the spirits, and on the other side, big cities mean freedom. If there are more people, there is more cultural life, there's more diversity, there's more money for cultural life, and most of all, there's more anonymity. And this is why people who are a bit outside the norm always tend to go big cities. This is why the whole gay scene is normally in The big cities, I mean, Zurich also part of it, Tel Aviv a part of it, New York or Paris. But as Zurich is a rather small city, as is Tel Aviv, Zurich has, roughly 500,000 of inhabitants. If I walk here in the streets, I always meet people, always. And this is cutting down your freedom quite considerably. I don't know whether this answered your question.
I have another question. In the film, you say that the population of ציריך didn't change. Actually, the population at 2014 is the same like the year you were born at 1964.
Exactly,
How do you explain this?
You have a similar phenomenon in Tel Aviv. In Tel Aviv, in the 70s, population went down. And in the 80s, someone wrote an article, I saw on Wikipedia, that Tel Aviv was dying. So there was a moment when many cities were going down because people preferred to live outside. I do believe it has also to do with the idea of the auto city, right? You have your car, you drive outside, you live outside, and all of a sudden, all of this changed. And also in Tel Aviv, the municipality did, as I read, lots of measures to bring in young people. And then you had the success with your high-tech industries, and all of a sudden it went up again. And here the thing is just, I mean, it's not very cool to live in the suburbs, right? And as Zurich is one of these European very old cities, you don't have a lot of space for cars. So if you live outside, you have to come with the car. It's a bit of a nuisance. It's cool to live. People who have money tend to live in the city, and many of them don't even own a car. You don't need a car because public transport is quite working quite well. It's also a bit the trend, right? That people started all of a sudden to prefer to live in cities than in their own house in the outskirts.
But in the film, you say that the demand for housing in ציריך is growing, though the population is stable.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the thing is, it went down and then it went up again, and it is still growing, right? It is still growing, and this is what is pushing prices. And I mean, you know, one of the problems of my film, of course, is it's much too simplistic. When you make a documentary, you have 3 hours. You think you're too simplistic, you have to tone it down to 90 minutes. Then comes your producer, says it's too complicated, make 3 more jokes inside, put this and this out. Then you try to rebel, not would you do it. Then come in the storytelling specialists who say, yeah, nice film, but much too complicated, so more difficult. And I mean, one of the things I know, in every city, it's totally different, but I would say there are 3 things that are a common denominator in all the cities I saw, which are talking about gentrification problems. Number 1 is success. Every city that has a gentrification problem is a successful city. And what is worse than gentrification? The contrary of gentrification. If you look at a city like Detroit, where you had all the car factories that went down, and all of a sudden big part of the population went out. The municipality can't pay services anymore. It's horrible. Or if you look at Eastern Germany, beside Dresden and Leipzig, there was lots of places where the population went to West Germany, and you have only the losers and the Nazis, and there you don't have any gentrification. And if there is a bus, you will always find a place, even if there is a rush hour. So number 1 was success. Number 2, super important, is demographics. And demographics can have 2 reasons. It can be that your city is popular because you have immigration. In the case of Zurich, you have immigration from the rest of the canton, Zurich. You have immigration from the rest of Switzerland. You have immigration from the rest of the European Union, because if you have a job as a citizen of the European Union, you can live and work in Switzerland. In the case of Israel and of Tel Aviv, as a second factor, you have the birth rate. You know, Israel in the last 20 years grew by a third, which is, I mean, unheard of, right? So you have the problem of demographics, and if you have if you have a growth of your population, you need an answer how you deal with the scarcity of flats or houses. And the third thing is the problem of capital. At the moment, everywhere we have the problem, if you have capital and you put it into bank, you won't get any interest. So there are two possibilities what you can do with your capital. Number one is you go into shares. And number two is you go into property, be it land or housing. And this is also one of the drivers for higher prices. And this would be my question to you, Guy. Until what extent is the fact that worldwide there's too much capital the driving factor for gentrification and the augmentation of house prices and flat prices in Israel and in Tel Aviv?
Can you speak louder in a way? I
yes,
think,
sure.
People can't hear you. They complain.
Oh, I'm sorry. Really? Okay. Is it better now?
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah, better.
Is it better like that?
Yeah.
Okay, I try very fast. Number one was three common denominators. Number one is success, cities that are successful. Number two, demographics. If more people are coming to your city, prices will go up if you don't have enough production of houses. And number three is capital. And in the moment we have worldwide too much capital that has no clue where to invest. There are two possibilities. Number one is shares, and number two is property, quite often housing. And this is one of the drivers that prices are going up. And this is my question to you: until what extent is the fact that there is so much capital that doesn't know where to go a driver that is driving prices up in Tel Aviv?
I didn't understand the question.
Okay, I try to be more. I try to explain. For example, you have a company like BlackRock, right? Okay. They are buying in Scandinavia. They are buying in the province big housing projects. They make a renovation and they go up with the rents. And the reason why they are doing this is that as central banks are producing so much money, money has a problem where it could be invested. And it's either shares or it's a property, right?
Yeah.
You agree? Okay. My question to you, how far is the problem of prices going up also a problem because there's too much capital that just needs investment in Tel Aviv?
I'm not sure that I understood it, but I think that the reality in Israel is a bit different. We are overpopulated in general in Israel, and also the demand in Tel Aviv is big. We lack housing, yes, all over the country, especially in Tel Aviv area. And so I'm not sure it's you can compare it to Switzerland. It's totally different reality.
But I must add, yes, please. So it's interesting that you say that, because we were also talking about, you mentioned Bauhaus or the White City, but interestingly enough, when Tel Aviv was founded from its beginning, actually, it was and largely also the fifth immigration wave that came from, German-speaking backgrounds and brought capital with them. So actually, even the British mandate would, you would need to show like a capitalist certificate in order to go in the country. And a lot of those so-called, what you call Bauhaus buildings are actually investments of people that brought money with them to Tel Aviv and invested in buildings and then rented the flat out to other families as well. And I must agree with you that we see a lot of speculations, real estate speculations going on now. It's interesting the link I think you made between success and capitalism. I never thought about it like that, but I'm sure this is very, very right. And perhaps also like this sort of startup push that we got here from the last 10 years rose the prices really high. But Guy, I think you also told me that you have this tendency to see where a good flat could be invested in and then maybe sell it and buy a new one. So perhaps you can tell us how you make your speculations and if it's your way to invest, really.
I prefer to ask Toomas questions, actually. But
okay.
It's easier.
We'll have to get to you in the end, but whatever.
But it's connected. I'm curious. I see that you are. I don't want to be rude, but
please be rude, really. Don't hesitate.
But it seems from the movie that you are collecting apartments all over the world, and I want to ask, what is your motivation? How do you choose the cities and the places where you buy the apartments? You have apartments from the movie, I know, in São Paulo, in Mexico City, in Tbilisi.
Yes.
So
I can quickly explain. I don't have an apartment in Sao Paulo, but you know, I was with this Mexican, and all of a sudden she was pregnant, and there was a child. And as you can see, already an old geezer, I thought, you know, maybe tomorrow I can fall off my bike. And I also had for a long time a rather, how we say, a bit dangerous lifestyle sometimes. So I thought her family was still there, and she was always saying, yeah, let's buy something in Mexico. And I just remember, I said, okay, so you tell me if you see something. And then there came this a bit Bauhausish apartment, which I had never seen. I knew exactly where it was, and this was the reason I bought it. And also because I had a quite good job and had lived at this time in Sao Paulo. I had lived very cheap in Sao Paulo and had done a good paying job in Zurich. So I had the 180,000. I mean, it's not, it's doable if you're from Switzerland, 180,000 bucks. And the flat in Tbilisi was this friend of mine who always was pushing. And I saw the flat and I loved it so much, and it cost me $70,000, which is like a good car. I've never owned a car. So yeah, so I just bought this flat, and there was a time when I was very often in Tbilisi. And now the flat in Mexico is rented to someone from Mexico, and the flat in Georgia needs another renovation. And at the moment, because of Corona, I can't go there. But one thing is also that there is this question, which I was asking you before, you know, what do you do with your money? And one thing is for sure, I mean, my prognosis for Tbilisi is that it will fall back in the reign of Mr. Putin, but Russians love Georgia. There will always be buyers who will like a very good dedicated apartment in Tbilisi, and the same goes for Mexico.
And it's connected, and maybe you answer it before. What is the difference between metropolis and a normal city? Because you say you like metropolis.
Yes, I love metropolis.
It's interesting me. Maybe you answered it before, but I would like you, if you can.
I try to elaborate. The thing is, number one, anonymity. Swiss intellectuals in the 70s, Paris was the city because it's more anonymous. You can be just, you're free, you know, you change the neighborhood and you can be anybody. And a second thing is metropolis gives you freedom because you have more diversity, more groups. I mean, it's a new phenomenon that through the internet, you can live in a small city or even in a village and be part of a very specific group. Before that, you had to go to a metropolis. If you, I don't know, if you were in the group who liked sadomasochism in pink clothes, you would only find it in Berlin or Los Angeles, but not in medium-sized cities, right? Because there were just not enough people.
And Switzerland doesn't answer this demand of yours.
Well, until Zurich until a certain degree, yes, but still, as it's a small city, you don't have the same diversity you find in real big cities.
Sure.
What helps in Zurich is, as it's a rich city, the cultural life is very interesting. You have, you know, very good the stars and cinema and theaters and blah, blah, blah. But compared to the really metropolises, I mean, it's just richer in cultural life.
So last time we also had a preparation for this talk, and something else came out of your movie when you talked about Paris, is that you know, you could manage in a very, very small flat. No, it's like your living room, and then you want to go out and have a coffee, so you would extend sort of your living room to, you know, the smaller neighborhood which is just around you. So we were starting a debate around this topic, because then what it means that density is sort of a cultural question. I mean, density could be X in Sao Paulo or in Mexico, but it would be different in Zurich and in Paris. Would you say it's a cultural thing, or is it rather really the demand that is in the city?
I would go further. I wouldn't say it's cultural, it's a habit, right? It's a habit, and I mean, if you're asking yourself what are the possibilities to deal with gentrification, you could say a neoliberal answer would be that the demand is too high because apartments, for example, in Tel Aviv are too cheap. If you go up with the prices, you will have the same phenomenon as in Paris and as in New York, that people will live in smaller spaces, right? They will, more people will share an apartment. But of course, I mean, the thing is, it would be a clever idea to share more of the space you have. And there's, for example, there's a co-op just right behind me, built by the city of Zurich. They have one thing that I find hugely interesting. If you live in this cooperative, there are shared rooms you can rent for a very low price if you have guests. So you don't need a guest room. So this is one of the good ideas, that you share more stuff. Or another thing is, the reason I don't have a car here in Zurich, we have a very efficient car sharing system. I read that Tel Aviv has now a car sharing system as well. I only can say, you know, around here, 5 minutes in this direction, 3 minutes in this direction, I find cars, and I have like a credit card, and then I look which car I can take. So I don't need a car. And with the fact that we will have much more auto-driven cars with artificial intelligence, you don't need to own cars anymore. So it will only be very rich people who have their own car, and the rest can have shared cars who will pick you up, so you have more space. So sharing is one of the ideas how you can have denser cities or more efficient cities.
So you're talking about density, and we also saw that in your film, that you're referring to density as something positive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, you also referred in the movie, and of course, because we are a conservation center, to the historic urban fabric, or to modernity, or to conservationists versus, I don't know how you call them, you said something very interesting, the boogeyman or something like that. So you really like say black or white. So I have to ask you right now what you think about like historic cities, and if you know you would want to see like the historic center of Zurich densed up in a way that maybe Mexico is, or could you imagine stuff like that? Do you think it's a positive thing to do, regardless of what is there, to like the modernist approach to it, so rasa and build high rises?
Well, I mean, one of the interesting things is one guy saying in the film in the early 60s, if we would have never changed anything in Zurich, it would still be a Roman castle, right? I show also this plan where the idea was to erase the medieval city. Now, the interesting thing is what would have substituted the medieval city in the 30s would have been beautiful Bauhaus buildings, right? So today, if they would have erased the city, today, I'm sure we maybe would struggle whether we should preserve the beautiful Bauhaus buildings of the 30s or make something new. But I mean, besides being polemic, of course, I'm very in favor of the preservation of beautiful buildings. I mean, in the case of Tel Aviv, it would be a shame to throw away your Bauhaus heritage. But I'm absolutely convinced there are lots of places inside the city of Tel Aviv and also in Greater Tel Aviv where without a big loss you can destroy stuff and build much denser. And don't forget, you have the demographic problem, which is not solved by sharing cars and sharing guest rooms. You need more houses, you need more flats.
But you were talking about the community, or whatever makes you want to come to a city is sort of a community. So do you think that by building high rises you can perform or create communities in the same way as, for example, those beautiful social housing projects in Zurich, where there's like a sort of identity that is embedded also in the architecture itself? I mean, it's an anonymity versus, sort of architecture or cultural identity debate, which I'm trying to negotiate here with you.
No, I understand totally. The interesting thing is, if I say I like specific communities in big cities, it's on one hand the community, on the other hand it's the anonymity. And what might be quite nice in a high rise can also be the anonymity, right? And there I do believe there I'm quite liberal. I think people should choose themselves what they like. And one thing is also quite often the high rise is a bit of this horror idea. It's anonymous, it's very big and so on. You can make high rises of 30 meters, of 50 meters, 60 meters, which are not so huge, but still where you produce more flats per square meter.
Okay. I would want to perhaps see if the audience would want to also engage in questions, because I could speak for her, but I would really want to hear what our audience has to say, because there's lots of very interesting people with us today. And this is a call, or if anybody wants to say something or write, and I'll ask Mr. Hammerly or Hammerly, please say so. And while you're doing that, I would still go back to you, Guy, because
Kadima.
Yalla, Kadima. So Guy, what is your objective? I mean, you write so much about real estate and land speculation and what is being built. Oh, not even in Tel Aviv, but we were talking also about the outskirts of Tel Aviv, like Ramat Gan and Givatayim, that have like, you know, those governmental plans like Tama 38, which is for Mr. Hamley, I'm just saying, additions of fluorite in order to strengthen the buildings against earthquakes. Yeah, like you get more floor. And then, you know, the landscape around us is changing very, very fast. And Guy, I want to ask you, what is your opinion? Because do you see that so fast happening, and I'm sure you have a lot to tell us about your, you know, thoughts here in the subject of urban density and how it's changing.
Well, first of all, I don't think we spoke about the population of Tel Aviv, and I think Tомאס said it didn't grow much. But the point is that Tel Aviv is, we don't treat Tel Aviv as a separate city anymore. It's part of the metropolis.
A megalopolis.
And this is a new attitude. I mean, the understanding that Tel Aviv is a huge, it's a bigger metropolis or a bigger Tel Aviv. And I think this is something relative new. And about adding more floors, or as Tama 38, or making the cities around Tel Aviv more dense, I think it's very positive. It's very good, Sharon.
Yeah, so
I don't always like the way it looks like, or but I think that the principle is very good.
So what would you suggest in order to perhaps, you know, create, well, that's my opinion, but maybe you can share it with me, like create some sort of profile or a community around those new buildings. I mean, there's one person of the audience just mentioned, and I think it's very important to say in the case of Israel or Tel Aviv, that there's two cases of density. One is densifying the city itself, and the second is what we call התחדשות עירונית, like, you know, the renewal of the city. And in Israel, we tend to do both things together, or even conservation itself has a plan which allows building additions on one hand, but on the other hand, it refurbishes, you know, the old structure. So the question is, how can we like generate more buildings and generate prosperity in terms of city planning and renewal, but still sort of keep cultural identity? I think for me is always the most important thing, without, you know, really producing more units.
Can I answer in Hebrew? It's
yes,
Tומאס.
Sure.
אני לא בטוח שאני יורד לעומק דעתך, כאילו, את שואלת איך אפשר לשמר זהות תרבותית או איזה מרקם קהילתי וגם לייצר התחדשות. אני חושב שהעיר טבעה שהיא משתנה כל הזמן, וזה בסדר וזה נורמלי, ואני חושב שאנחנו משמרים יותר מדי, תסלחו לי שאני מדבר בפלטפורמה הזאת שלכם, אבל אני חושב שיש יותר מדי שימור באופן כללי בתל אביב, ובאופן כללי באזור, כי אנחנו כבר חרגנו, אנחנו כבר משמרים את רמת אביב ואת שכונת שפירא, ואנחנו משמרים את יפו, והכל כבר נהיה שימור, וכבר אני חושב שיש יש הגזמה גדולה, אני חושב שאנחנו לב המטרופולין, ואני חושב שהיה צריך לייצר פה צפוף משמעותי, והרבה יותר משמעותי, ולצד שימור דרך אגב, השאלה היא איך עושים את זה, ואני בטוח שאפשר גם וגם, ובנוגע לסוגיה הזאת של שימור קהילתי, אני חושב שהכל משתנה, וצריך לבדוק איך הדברים האלה עובדים, ואין איזו תשובה אחת כאילו ברורה, אבל אתה לא יכול, זה לא הגיוני, בוא נגיד, אני גר בדרום תל אביב, ואני מסתכל פה שכונת שפירא, נמצאת צפונית לי, ואני פשוט לא מצליח להבין כאילו מה ההיגיון בשימור שלה, זה נראה לי מטופש במילים האלה, בשימור, מה שקוראים שימור מרקמי או whatever כאילו, והאוכלוסייה שם, גם כן מדברים על שימור האוכלוסייה, ואני מכיר, כן, אני מיודד עם שולה קשת, וכל הדיבורים על ג'נטריפיקציה והכל, ואני לא מתחבר לזה, אני נורא מצטער, כאילו, האוכלוסייה שם היא גרה שם 30 שנה, היא לא קדושה.
So I can translate for the few people that are not here. I love what you just said because I think somebody is speaking out loud and it's about time that we do that. And we have Jeremy Hoffman here as well, the head of the conservation department. And I'd like him maybe to say something to what you said. But before that, I'm going to just say, Toomas or Hamali, to you a few words about what Guy said. He said, and I really agree with him, that the city is changing constantly. And who or how can we stop the change, and why should we stop the change is a big question. And then he said that we're conserving too much anyway, and he doesn't understand why so much needs to be conserved, and that he, correct me if I'm wrong, Guy, maybe you said it a bit different, but he's also living in the south of the city, and then already people talk about conservation of community and not only of buildings. And for him, it's a bit over the top, and he's seeing that the city needs to renew itself and, you know, make more building units and preserve less. Is that sort of what you said, Guy? Or do you want to?
Yeah, so.
Yes, sort of. Okay, so Jeremy, do you want to say something to Guy in this occasion?
I didn't have the attention to speak here tonight. So first of all, Mr. Hammerly, I would like to say that I really, really loved your movie, really. And I don't think it's about you. I don't think it's about the city. I think it's about us, what happened to us during the last 50 years. And it's amazing to see this reflection, this mirror. And if I have to say, in one phrase, what I understand you're saying that modernism is back. In a way, it's winning. And I think it's overwhelming in a way to hear that. You are the first movie that speaks against conservation, and I was so happy to see it. I had like a huge smile, and now guys talking against conservation, and I think there's a point there. I mean, this goes completely against my job, but I must be very frank and honest, saying that there are moments when when I ask myself this question, whether we're doing too much. I'm not sure that Tel Aviv got to that point, because when you're looking at these bars, for example, when you see the percentage of buildings that went through real renovation, it's still not much. It's like 20 or 25%. It's very Israeli to feel that the job is done and we have to go forward. But you raised this question, and I don't know. I don't have any comments beyond that. Just to say that the question of whether historicism and postmodernism, maybe they are over, and where we're heading from here. So. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy, for being so honest. And I'm very happy that you answered this way. And also, Hillel Shokin is here. I don't know if you want to also say something, Hillel. Just I don't want you to enforce you, but please, if you.
Well, I thank you for asking me.
Maybe you can just introduce yourself.
Well, I'm just an architect and a planner, and I'm interested in cities. And I'm ashamed to say I didn't watch the movie yet, but now after the talk, I'm going to run and watch it, because I loved almost everything you said, Toomas. And I think I'm happy about it because when I say it here in Israel, I always feel almost alone and I'm being attacked for most of the ideas you have shared with us. And I'm lucky you said them because as they say in Hebrew, I'm sure there is also a saying in English, there is no prophet in his own city. So if it comes from Zurich, it's much better than if it comes from Israel. I want to also try to answer your question about investment in Tel Aviv. I think Tel Aviv is different than those cities that have become ports for capital of very rich people who don't know what to do with it, like New York, London, maybe Zurich now, I don't know. But I think Tel Aviv is, in a way, is still not as attractive for the extreme rich. And also only recently, we have made contacts with some very rich Arabs who may want to lend their money here. And we might see now an avalanche of investment in luxury towers on the beach of Tel Aviv, coming from Dubai and so on. But so far, I think it's mostly very rich Jewish people who buy stuff in Tel Aviv, and not so much in order to live in, but maybe to keep a safe house in a way, and also to come for 2 weeks a year and have a place to be in. But still, doing that, they are helping raising the costs of real estate in Tel Aviv. I also think that you are absolutely right that successful cities like Tel Aviv need to build a lot if they want to keep the diversity of public. Because if it doesn't build a lot, the prices will go up and they will become cities for the rich only. And I think our conservation attitude has become really ridiculous. We are conserving environments that are, as far as I can tell, inhuman. Although people, people don't like when they move their cheese. You know what? They don't like change, and also people think they will live forever. They don't want to realize that there is a day that they will die and somebody else will live in their apartment, and the community where they live will look entirely different, and they just don't realize that. And if we did live according to those concepts, we would have mummified cities rather than living cities. Whenever there is a discussion about this, I love to show, I have a photograph of the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan, which was taken in 1900. And it's a wonderful photograph because it shows a huge Plaza Hotel surrounded by 4-story buildings in the foreground and the park in the background. And if you wanted to take a photograph like this from the same angle in Manhattan today, you can't find the Plaza Hotel because all those four stories building that look actually very nice as they were have been replaced by towers much higher than the Plaza Hotel. So I think we need to conserve or to keep buildings which are really great works of art, and we do have some of those, but we have become mummifying the city in many ways instead of conserving the real quality stuff. And the last thing I want to say is you are the first person that I hear that uses the word anonymity, which I think to me is probably the definition of the city in a sense. And if you don't like the anonymity, go and live in a kibbutz. But if you want to be free, you need this anonymity. So, you know, when this conversation stops, I'm running to watch your movie.
Thank you, Hillel, for that. I have another question, which I found in your movie very, very interesting. You said about Tbilisi, I think it was Tbilisi, that you were describing the TV cable that was hung on your porch, no? And then you ran up and saw all those cables and all this mess. And you said that you missed the sort of Swiss order. And I'm just, you know, I thought about what you said now also, Hillel, and of course we're conserving a lot of the physical aspects sort of top down, but I'm just asking myself if we can make people, you know, conserve or not conserve, or maybe we can change the word conservation for, you know, caretaking, or for, I don't know, taking responsibility in a way that's, you know, we don't have to enforce the sort of laws that make us all uncomfortable when we talk about regeneration. Do you agree with me, or why did you like Zurich more than Tbilisi in that moment of time? And how would you merge those two cultures together when it comes to planning?
I mean, on one side, I show like an ultra liberal idea of the city, and what I really found interesting were these illegally constructed balconies, which normally function. And so I was singing like the high song of you can do, of laissez-faire, you can do whatever you want. And on the other side, you have to admit that there are also things where you're quite happy if your neighbors can't just do as they please. So, I mean, on one side, it was a joke, you know, and also for a Swiss public seeing these cables, it was, for me, I knew it's a guaranteed laugh in a Swiss cinema. People will laugh about it because
it's not funny in Israel.
Yeah, it's not funny in Mexico. They don't get, it's a very Swiss joke in a certain way. And on the other hand, I just think, you know, I try to be a bit more complex there, to say everything has two sides. It's not as easy as that, as just to say laissez-faire. But I just wanted to, one thing I was very happy is what Mr. Hoffman said, which was totally the idea, like one of the basic ideas was...
Hammerly, please talk more to the microphone.
Sorry?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, better now?
Yes.
What Mr. Hoffman said, I was really very pleased with that one of the core ideas was a rehabilitation of modernity. And if you want, also a rehabilitation of the Bauhaus ideals, not the Bauhaus style, the Bauhaus ideals. Build more for all the people that there are. And the other thing is also, I was very happy to hear what Mr. Schocken was saying. I just can't agree totally. And I mean, it's always, you know, I can't say anything about what you should preserve or not. This is up to you. I don't know the city well enough, but I do think it's really a very good discussion one has to have. And quite often when the argument is a city is losing its identity, if you're destroying stuff, I just would say, you know, 5 years later, a new building is totally adapted. And one of the problems with urbanism is you have to think in steps of, in Switzerland, at least 20, 25 years, or maybe in other places, 10 years, but you have to think in the long perspective. And this is also something Mr. Schocken said, you know, cities are changing. it's quite often, you know, when I see these, I just saw a movie about, movie about Jaffa, and they are complaining that this shop is leaving or that shop is leaving. I mean, sure, it's sad if the Thai shop is leaving, but the thing is, look here, no one has a Thai anymore.
Thomas, can I stop you for a minute? I think you are knocking something on your table. So
okay, I try. I'm very sorry for that I'm technically so not up at Tel Aviv of technology. No, but the thing is, quite often, you know, lifestyle is changing, and if people say it's so sad that all the old cafes are gone, that they themselves prefer to go to Starbucks or whatever, that's just their choice. And it's quite often the critique of gentrification is on a very superficial level.
Okay. Guy, is there anything you want to add to this discussion? Because you sort of inflamed it when you said too much conservation. So maybe you want to reflect after all what was said here.
Actually, not now.
Not now. Okay, we'll do it. We'll do it again, I'm sure. So our time is unfortunately up, but Hillel and everybody else who didn't see this wonderful movie, it's both entertaining as well as very enriching, and you can learn so much from it. So please go ahead and do it. And Emily, I hope to see you soon again here in Tel Aviv, on top of our roof, or somewhere else in Zurich, wherever the next metropolis we're going to conquer, or you're going to conquer is. I'll come to visit you. And thank you everybody for joining us. Next week, we are going to have a retrospective on Moti Ben-Chorin. He's an architect that has built a lot and shaped a lot the landscape of Israel at large. He recently died, and we will talk about him. Michael Jacobson, also a journalist, is going to reflect a little bit on his work and his influence on our landscape. I can assure you we're not going to announce all his buildings for conservation yet, but maybe just to, you know, talk about the personality and everything he did in Israel is very important. So thank you again, Toomas Hammerly and Guy Naldi and Hillel Shoken and Jeremy for joining us, and everybody else. It was a pleasure again. And I hope to see you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.